in the middle of the corridor, accessed by current transit. The dark blue is the additional catchment area for somebody who accesses transit within 20 minutes of that business. So you're expanding your catchment areas. If you're a business and if the tolerance is 20 minutes to go to a restaurant, we wouldn't travel more on that on a bus. This actually opens the catchment area for these neighborhood districts open. Same goes if you live in one of those corridors and what a 20-minute ride is for you. The last thing I want to mention is, a lot of these projects, they are a true partnership with a lot of civic organizations as well. These organizations have been instrumental in the planning process and implementation and public support for these projects. So Metropolitan Planning Council and the Active Transportation Alliance have been two key contributors to the project as far as doing work to help support the planning and grassroots support and outreach. We also partner with the Civic Consulting Alliance for some work on this project, a couple of business plans that we did to support the Central Loop project, and the Chicago Architecture Foundation. I'll get into that in a second. There's also been support from Chicago Community Trust and the Rockefeller Foundation. In these projects, since there are impacts, and we understand there's impacts, it's always easier if you have somebody cheering for you outside of actually the agency. We know as practitioners, as planners, that this is a pragmatic approach to solving the regional transportation mobility needs of the city. But if you have somebody outside, that their voice is heard a lot more than the government's voice. So I'll just say that. They've done a lot of branding. This is a website that's in support of all these groups to help promote the projects. That's really a good place to learn about all the projects going on in the city. BRT Chicago. They did a lot of grassroots organizing. There's a couple of events, pro-BRT events that they've done, rallies and things like that. And they also coordinated a design competition. We got submittals from dozens of architects from about I think about 10 or 12 countries, and everything from the very practical to the very ephemeral came in. But we actually used, this is the winner of the design competition for downtown, use this design actually in some of the planning for the Central Loop corridor with actually the station design. So a lot of this will be taken forward through that process. So it's a really exciting process, and it also gets the average person who's maybe not a transportation enthusiast interested in the project as well. So it's been helpful in that way. That's it. Again, I'll just say, for us, BRT in a couple of years here has done a tremendous job of expanding our high quality, high ridership transit network. And it's been a boon for us in Chicago. And we're very lucky to have the support, not only the political support, but also support within the agency and financial support from the FTA to do these projects. We'll answer any questions here. So.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, I'm Ed Paradise. I'm the chair of the RTA this year, and I want to help with Tom as well, to help with questions for Joe or Joe. Or Joe.
What kind of price differential do you envision for BRT service as opposed to, say, local and express?
Same as existing for us. A bus ride is $2, and a rail ride is $2.25. So there's not much differential anyway, but we see the same price as the bus.
And we have no differential in Cleveland. We have one flat price for me.
Ron? So Joe, during your presentation you mentioned that there was quite a bit of development that was going to be occurring by the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals and the Art Museum and so forth. How much of the $4 to $5 billion that's been credited, to the health line came about as a result of those institutions planning some major capital investments in the corridor?
I think there's a very significant portion of what happened because of the corridor. Another important thing, and you being a Clevelander, you understand that, you had businesses where Euclid Avenue was their back door, kind of reoriented their whole Cleveland, CSU is a great example, Cleveland State University, reoriented their campus so where Euclid Avenue now is their front door, and a tremendous expansion, I think, on that. I think things, we're seeing, like many cities, not just Cleveland, we're seeing many more companies moving downtown and wanting to be on the corridor. I mean, you cannot get an apartment anywhere along the corridor in Cleveland. I think that's all very positive. And when you look at what's happening, the corridor's kind of, it's happening all over, but it's radiating out a block or two or three from the corridor. The corridor is the nucleus that's radiating out from there.
Joe from Cleveland, you talked to us about how you wanted to make this very rail-like. And I saw a custom designed vehicle, I saw road work, signals, communications, utility work, landscaping, stations. And so I got to thinking, well, with all that, it's probably not that much less than rail. But yet you showed a slide that was 5 times cheaper than rail. And so I'm wondering what I'm missing. What element of rail is so expensive to yield your line 5 times cheaper than rail?
Well, I think there's several elements, and again, I'm not the engineer or estimator, but number one is, while we could do this project and move some of the utilities out of the right-of-way, with rail, you would have had to move all the utilities out of the right-of-way. Probably the older the city, the more stuff that's underground. The
Okay.
great thing about BRT is if somebody has to come and do a water line replacement under you, you can go around them. I mean, you have that flexibility, where if it was rail and it would shut down the rail network, you don't really have to move those utilities outside. Secondly, if it's a rail line, you've got to find a way from the end of the line back to the rail depot, back to where those things are stored and maintained, versus if it's a BRT system, when it gets to the end of the line, you can simply drive to its depot. So I think the infrastructure investment would be much less. The overhead catenary system, the power system, all with rail you need power substations along the corridor. So a lot of things. When the system was designed, one of the concepts was to have it be electric vehicles with overhead catenary, overhead catenaries. The price of the vehicle, even if it's a rubber tired bus with overhead catenary, is about, the difference would be about twice the amount, about $800,000 to $1.6 million just for the vehicles. And the overhead catenary, the power substation was estimated to be about $50 million just for that. So I think it all adds up.
Yeah,
And that's
particularly the overhead.
and that's on the capital side. On the operating side, I think that there's also a tremendous amount. The other thing that people don't think about, and people don't think about it if they don't run rail, but you also have to man and staff when you're done. And you know, if you have a son or daughter who wants a job who's totally secure, and they can live in any major city they want to, have them be a rail director or a power and way signal person. I mean, these are tremendously difficult jobs to fill. There are a few professionals in the industry. We keep stealing them from other agencies. So really, my biggest area of vacancies are on the technical rail side, because again, you have to staff to be able to provide that reliable service. It's very different from the bus side.
I'm not Steve Rao, serving on the council of Morrisville, and my question is on around transit-oriented development. My question is really, what advice do you have for communities that are building out TOD plans? Because a big part of our future development, the 2 miles remaining we have in our town, is transit-oriented development, which basically the idea of transit station with workforce housing, walkable communities, basically represents about $300 million of potential tax base for our town. And I'm having a hard time envisioning how BRT kind of development would fit into that plan. I think that primarily, when most people are driven to Morrisville here, most of our state roads are congested beyond, and it's time for a full vessel bypass driving around Morrisville. So how would it work? Would we have to build out another bus?
I'm not sure the bypass is going to generate the economic development you want either. Let me tell you.
What I mean is that literally on our roads in Morrisville, on 54, which is the main state road in Morrisville Carpenter, there are people already in traffic in the mornings and evenings for sometimes an hour and 10 minutes. So I don't see how a bus, I think this is great, economic benefits, but how would that kind of, would bus rapid transit fit into a town that's planning TOD? Because we're not the only municipalities looking at that.
Let me give you the Cleveland history, and Chicago has many more better examples. But as you saw in my presentation, our rail system dates back 100 years. And with only a few exceptions, did we see what you might view as TOD around our rail stations. So I mean, I don't think TOD happens automatically no matter what you build. I think, again, the one thing I said, it's not our investment, it was other people leverage our investment. So I think someone has to do something positive, the chamber, the business, the city, tax incentives, whatever. So I think it all happens. But you know, while people were saying, Joe, is VRT going to develop TOD around our stations? I would say we have almost no TOD around our rail station. So I don't know that, again, rubber tires, steel wheels, I don't know that it matters. Because of our success of the health line and the TOD we've seen along the corridor, now those same developers saying, hey, Joe, I want to build something next to the rail side. So the TOD success of the health line, of the BRT line, is now spilling over to show us more success on the rail side. So I don't know that what the tires are made of is important. It's going to attract people. It's going to make it easier for people to get there. If they're not going to be in traffic for an hour and a half, if they want to get off the vehicle, whatever the wheels are made of, and shop and go to the restaurant and go to work, they're going to do it. So don't look at the wheels when you make that decision.
And I would just add too, just very quickly, you know, a trend you're seeing throughout the country actually is your center cities growing with population. It's more of a lifestyle, the lifestyle characteristics of a TOD, which is high density, high use, high activity, is just as much of a driver as the access. In Chicago, for instance, a lot of the areas around downtown have seen the most redevelopment over the last 20 years or so. And it's not because they're by a rail station or by a bus line, it's because they're all very close proximity to those jobs. So I guess what I would ask, you know, you to probably look at is, you know, what do you want to get out of the TOD? Is it the reliable commute that you can get to downtown Raleigh within 20 minutes guaranteed, right? And that's more of a driver than the actual mode. And I would just kind of leave it open there.
I think the area where we saw the greatest TOD development is in the Midtown Cleveland area, where they actually had new zoning, you know, reduced the parking requirements, had the buildings be closer to the street, minimum 3 to 4 stories. They did things to promote density, which promotes greater transit usage, which promotes greater TOD. So nothing's in a vacuum. It's how the whole city decides to develop around it.
Ma'am, you have one thing right here?
So for both of you, it seems like both of your projects are about defining, articulating, and executing a vision. And so my question is, how important in that process were individual champions? Were there people who were influential in all the way through those 3 steps of defining the vision, making people understand it, and executing it?
Yes, and I've got a great quick story for that. You know, I think most projects have champions, and I think you've got a lot of champions right here in the room, but we had one champion, I think Ron will agree. It was former County Commissioner George Voinovich, former Mayor George Voinovich, who was Governor George Voinovich, and then Senator George Voinovich. So Mayor George Voinovich and County Commissioner George Voinovich saw the need on Euclid Avenue to do something better than what was there. When he was Governor George Voinovich, he accidentally or on purpose went to a trade mission and saw the BRT system in Curitiba and called back to the chamber and says, get down here, this might be what we need for Euclid Avenue. So he saw the vision, he found the vision, it was much more affordable to rail, possibly something we could do, and committed, if you get the federal money, I'll provide a significant portion of the local share for that. And then it became Senator George Voinovich, where he fought for the federal share to match the share that he committed as a state. So without a doubt, he was the champion, and I think you need people like that.
Look here, sir, you've been waiting.
Yeah, 2 questions ago, I think, one, I'm going to rephrase what I thought I heard him say in some ways, maybe a little bit differently. Both of the context of both, especially Ashland and the Euclid Avenue, there are very high ridership bus routes in an urban form that was very dense driven. And I think that part of the challenge a lot of folks in the Triangle have is that we don't have either of those in very many places. Most of our built form is post-war. Even if it's very walkable and very dense, it tends to be a more auto-oriented, and it's a different basically city form. And we don't have necessarily large areas of very high transit ridership in the existing bus system. So where I can imagine that these projects for both cities were no-brainers or are no-brainers, I realize Ashland's still kind of up in the air a little bit. They help make something that's already functional much more functional. And what we have a hard time seeing is how do we get from where we're at now to something else that we can maybe see that it works, but the A to B is the challenge. How do we change our urban form, find the right way to do this, change people's habits all at the same time? And I think that some people believe that the building rail helps accommodate that because the right of way is somewhat separate. But I'm not exactly sure. Can you talk a little bit about how?
Sure. I think one of the advantages you have here, my trip from the airport, and albeit it was an off day with a lot of people probably staying at home, but besides a stoplight, we didn't break once, from my trip from the airport to the hotel. And what you do have here is capacity. You have excess capacity right now. If you want to make these strategic decisions to dedicate a couple lanes through downtown, dedicate a couple lanes on the highway, you could do that. You could still have the same performance as rail.
And now's the time to do it, before it gets more difficult to do it.
And I'm not saying you guys never have congestion, but in comparison to Chicago, I just want to make sure you can't paint Chicago as a low-hanging fruit here, as an easy win, because we have 35,000 ADT on Ashland every day, and so it's a very heavy lift there, for that project. And so I would say, yeah, you have the capacity now, and in your dense urban areas like downtown Raleigh here. You could look at taking a lane on the street or a couple lanes on the street and dedicating that to bus.
And maybe because of what you have out the window, maybe it's not time for rail today, but maybe it'll be time for rail in the future. So again, you could maybe wish for rail forever, or do BRT in 3 to 5 years, and then in 10 or 15 years, when you have the density and population, you convert those lines that right away you've established to rail to handle the higher capacity. The key is to figure out what you need to do. Reserve that right of way today for whatever it turns out to be.
Couple more. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I recently heard at a meeting sponsored by an organization called Wake Up Wake County here in Raleigh that deals with public transportation, but like that bus transit would actually cost quite a bit less than what a monorail or a light rail is probably what I'm trying to find. Which even though the city of Charlotte has already got a light rail train and is talking about extending it, of which I grew up in Charlotte many years ago, where it sounds like bus, even though I had my mind on light rail for a long time, where now it seems like bus rapid transit may actually be a better way to go and get more people involved in transit, of which I don't drive, so I use public transportation a lot, like capital area transit, and it would be nice if not just Raleigh, but Durham, Chapel Hill, other municipalities across North Carolina got involved in this, and I'm also including like Triangle Transit, which serves Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Cary, well, I don't know if it serves Apex, but serves various municipalities here in the Triangle. Triangle Transit would be a wonderful bus system for this to have.
Yeah, those leaders that were here for lunch today, they went through, heard the presentation, and the point about the cost of BRT compared to light rail and heavy rail is very true. So those organizations have been very engaged. Yes, ma'am.
Well, it's been a treat to hear the details on these corridors, but your areas also have suburban territories and you have interstates, and one of the presentations earlier on BRT was dedicated lanes on interstates. So tell us a little bit about other things. It's kind of hard to compare what you're doing because we don't see how it fits with your total system. So say a little bit more about other initiatives and for your own systems, challenges, and how they compare with these successes.
Well, I think we all have challenges. One of the things that has happened in Cleveland is there's been a lot of out-migration. And thankfully we're seeing that out-migration slow and people moving back downtown, as we mentioned before, which I think is very positive. But I think, everything that you've seen, certainly from on the Chicago slide, that it's connectivity between buses coming in from the suburbs and buses either connected with rail or with BRT or with another service. The whole system, I think, has to be connected. So I think there's a lot of applicability for what we're doing and what you need to do here. Public transit works best in higher population, higher density areas. It just does. I think that's a fact that will always happen. The biggest challenge we have, and I think you have that same challenge, is how do you get people out of their single occupancy vehicles into public transit when the majority of the parking is either free or very inexpensive? And cost is a major, major driver of why people use public transit. Congestion, I can read and text legally, but really the number one cost is what's going to cost me in public transit and what's it cost to drive. So, any reason that they want to increase the people individuals using any non-single occupancy vehicle, carpooling, vanpooling, walking, biking, or certainly public transit, is to look at the parking rates and how the parking rates are structured. And if the parking rates are free, it's going to be a real tough time to get people out of those cars because it's tough to compete with free.
And how are they where you are?
They're low. I mean, relatively low. I think the people in Cleveland think there's a parking problem. If I can't park anywhere I want to, anytime I want to, and it's free. So it depends who you talk to. The average parking rate in Cleveland, monthly parking rate, which has gone up considerably over the last couple of years, is probably around $100, $120 a month.
You probably got time for a couple more, and then they'll be staying afterwards. They don't be leaving until probably about 5 o'clock, so you have time to hit them one-on-one and ask questions. So, sir?
Well, real quick, this is for the gentleman from Cleveland. I first heard about the helpline in 2010 and have followed it. A lot of people in our area have talked about doing a BRT step solution where you do BRT and then maybe upgrade it to a rail corridor in the future. LA is doing that with the Orange Line. It was initially planned for rail, then became BRT, and there's maybe way down the line it may become a rail corridor at some point if the ridership goes to the roof. Is there any plans for the helpline to ever be a rail corridor if it continues to grow in the direction?
I'm not going to rule that out, but our rail corridors, rail makes a lot of sense when you have, the majority of the cost of any transit system is that operator in the front of the vehicle, whether it's a bus or a train. And rail makes a lot more sense when that one operator is pulling 6, 7, or 8 cars in length of the train with them. Okay? In Cleveland, we're pulling 1 and 2 cars. So again, that cost differential, you don't get that much efficiency because of the infrastructure cost. So someday might it happen. Cleveland would have to double or triple in size for that, I think, to make financial sense. I think it's better, we're running BRT vehicles every 5 minutes. I can run every 4, every 3, every 2, or every 1, and probably still have a less cost structure than running rail, just on that corridor because of the constraints. So we don't have that density. At one point in time, we were the 6th largest city in the country, I think 5th shortly. Now we're 30 or 40. We just doesn't happen.
One more? Yes, ma'am.
When you were speaking about the helpline ridership, you mentioned that many of the riders on the helpline used to be rail users. Do you have any numbers on the new ridership that the helpline might have attracted?
About 19%.
You use public transit before, but use the helpline.
Yeah, well, about 19%. People who used to drive and now use the helpline.
That was a short answer, so we can kick another question.
That's what I had.
All right, yes, sir.
What about the added cost of replacing vehicles as opposed to rail, which there's less cost for replacing?
It's an $800,000 vehicle versus a $4 million vehicle. So I can replace vehicles 4 times before I get toward the cost of rail. I mean, a rail car today is $3.5 million. Looking at if you're planning a project today into the future, 8, 10 years when it's going to be built, you're probably pushing $4 million for a car.
Okay, guys, great job. Thanks very much. A couple of quick things. If you go out on YouTube, there's a great video. I think if you put in Cleveland BRT and Grand Rapids, Michigan. They ran a program up in Grand Rapids to do BRT, and they did a video. So I looked at it on YouTube. It's really a great video. We're also taking Joe out to dinner tonight, the 2 Joes, and hopefully Joe and I can convince him to drive one of their silver buses down here and park it downtown Raleigh so people actually see what these buses are like. I grew up in New York. My vision of buses was not an elegant, so I think we're going to put tuxes on, have the silver bus come down from Cleveland and show you what these buses are all about. But we know this is a major part of your time. We really appreciate your interest in this topic. It's very important to this community. and we appreciate your support today. Joe, any other comments, or
We're good.
Ed?
No?
Oh, the next event, that's right. Is there a slide that doesn't follow?
Yes, it's a little ways away.
There you go.
There you go.
So we hope to see you all then.
And the phone.
Area treatments to keep transit moving.
And that's the one after that. The previous slide actually is the next one. So on February 26th, just a few weeks away, we're going to have Wendy Stern from Port Authority of Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh's system, going to talk about a couple of their BRT projects, one existing, one proposed. Rick Kegel from Montgomery County, works for the Quarter Cities Transit Way, also works or is alone for the Maryland Transit Authority. Will speak to that proposed project. Montgomery County, Maryland's County Council just approved a 100-mile-plus bus rapid transit system for their community. That should be interesting. And then several folks from Luton, which is a community in England, they're going to do it via Cisco WebEx technology. They're going to talk about their busway and what they've just opened up there just a few months ago. So we thank you all for coming, and let's get moving.